Hi folks, it's Neil from Config Services. We're a software consultancy business focused around the open source tools and projects that you might use within your business. And this video is going to be about the LibreNMS alerting system. We're going to run through how to create and set up the alert rules themselves, how to set up device dependencies, and then go through and test these things as well. Okay, so to get us started, we're going to head over to alerts and then alert rules. In here, you can see we've already got an alert rule configured. We're going to set up new ones from scratch just to show you the process. We'll show you the sort of basic way to create alert rules. Then there's a slightly more advanced way using custom SQL queries. So we'll start off. Now, we've got a couple of ways to kickstart creating alerts. One is from this alert rule collection that's embedded into LibreNMS. So this is usually contributed by maintainers or the community. And it contains a bunch of helpful get started kind of alert rules to kick you off. So example there, you've got device down, up and down. This is one that I'm going to replicate quite easily. You've got other things like port usage, so you can specify if the utilization of a port is over a certain percentage. BGP peers being up and down, so sessions down here. So quite a wide array of different rules to be able to select from. We're going to create from scratch, but there's also still a couple of ways to actually bring alert rules into the system. So you can import from on the left hand side. You've got different ways here. So you've got an alert rule. This is an existing rule that you might have already created. So basically a duplication of an existing alert rule. So if you click that, we'll get the option then to see all the alert rules that we've previously created. You can also import from the collection. So if you're in this menu, you don't want to go back out, then you can import straight from the collection there. This old format, now you're probably unlikely to use that nowadays. The new alerting system has been in place for a good 5 years, but there was a previous alerting system, and basically if you've still got any alert rules set up in that platform, you're doing an upgrade or you found an example online, then you can actually still import from this. You just paste it into this box here and it will convert it automatically to the new style format. And then the last one is to import from an SQL query. So this is by far the easiest way to pass queries around. If you're sharing them with colleagues or other people in the community, you can share the SQL that gets produced by an alert rule you've created. You again just paste that into there and it'll get passed automatically. Now, setting one up from scratch, just give it a rule name at the top. So testing device down. We're going to just make sure we get all devices down as part of this test. Now, a little bug in the UI here, just have to click to open this twice to make it expanded. The format that you see here when you're going through and creating the rules is based on the database schema. So as you look through the list here, you've always got a name, and then a dot, and then followed by another name. And that is basically table name dot column name. So we scroll through this list, you can see pretty much every single table and column available in LibreNMS's database is in here. Now that doesn't mean you can use every single one of these fields available, unfortunately. You have to always make sure you're using a table which references back to a device ID. LibreNMS's alerts are always tied to an individual device, so need to reference that device ID. Now that can kind of cascade down a little bit. So one example is if you've got port groups which have got ports associated with it. Now the port groups don't have a device ID, but the ports do, and it will do a lookup through those tables to then get to ports, and in turn that has a device ID which then can pull the device information out. Predominantly though, pretty much every table will have a device ID in there, so you should be okay to use most, but it's just worth pointing that out. Now, if you haven't used MySQL or MariaDB or another sort of database before, it's worthwhile having a little look around just to see what's in there and the way the tables are laid out, what sort of data's in that, and then you can use that knowledge to create your alert rules. So if I just quickly shift over to a shell here, so we've got our demo database set up, and if I just do show tables, now this lists all the tables available in LibreNMS, and you'll see some of these match up now. So we've got things like access points, you'll have bills, devices, etc. as we look through here. So we've got bill ports, and you can see that one here. Now if we actually describe those tables, so the easiest one to start with is the devices table itself. You can see these are all the columns now available in that particular table. So again, we go back to here, start typing devices, and we can see now we've got a list of relevant fields that you can reference back to the table. So have a look around and then just, do some selects. So select, I mean, you'd typically do a star, but for me, I'm just going to quickly do hostname. So I'll select hostname from devices. And you can have a look at what data is in there to kind of say, right, I want to do a lookup and say, does the device name match this iOS XR? If it does, send an alert as an example. Okay, so one way to actually create some alert rules is to use macros. And these are basically shorthand versions of what you might create yourself, just trying to simplify the setup for people. So one example here is, let's say, device_down. And what that's going to do is it's looking for a particular status for the device. It's making sure the device is actually enabled and not ignored, etc. So rather than you specify those fields to check all of that, you can use the macro to get that consolidated view of what the device down might look like. And one thing to look for actually is if you go to the alerting documentation, we go to rules here, you'll be able to see that we've got some of this documented that you can have a look at. So if I go devices down, and this is the one we were just looking at then, we're basically saying, is the device status 0, which means down, 1 is up, and is the macro device there as well? So if I go back and expand what the macro device is, it's this one. It's checking that the device is not disabled. So 0 means it's not disabled, and it's not ignored, 0 being not ignored. So these are all usually explained in the documentation, along with obviously how to build the rules up itself and what the references mean when you come to say, select from your builder UI, what does a like mean in this case? It gets converted into SQL queries in the background. So it just converts that for you so you can see exactly what you need to do. If I head back down to this alert builder itself, we've now selected this macros device down, and I just want to choose yes, that we want to check that. And that's simply the easiest type of alert you can set up. If I save that now, we will start generating alerts. Okay, you might want to do things a little bit more complicated. So if I just add an extra rule in here, and you can also group by these as well. So if I kind of go in now and go, I want to restrict this to a particular device. So I'm going to choose device hostname equals, and as I mentioned before, iOS XR. So now we're going to say, is the device down? And does the hostname specifically match this? That's a bit of a crazy example because you're probably not going to want to bind these rules to those host names within the builder. You're going to want to actually map it to devices here down below. But it's just one example of the capabilities you've got within it. So if I delete this now, so you've also got ability to do groups. And if you notice, you've always got the and or, so you can kind of create a group here where we're checking two different things. We can do an or, so we could go in this one. Again, we'll just check the host name is equal to iOS XR, or the host name equals, and then I've got another device here, 8.8.8. So it's going to say, is the device down and does it match one of these two, as an example. You can keep adding groups, nested groups within this. You can add additional groups. One thing to just give you a bit of a heads up on, you can't reorder these. So you need to get the order correct when you start building this out, because obviously the ands and the ors can mean slightly different things depending where they get placed. So you can't, unfortunately, move these things around. So if you accidentally add a group ahead of something else, you might need to delete it and re-add it back in again. Okay, so I'm going to just leave this as a basic test here. Now you've got severity. So this is just an informational field, if you like, so where you can maybe use this to react to different alerts that are coming into your systems. So you can actually set things all the way from the OK status through to critical. So warning's the default, but you can change that on a per alert rule basis. These are the three options that you're probably going to change when you set new rules up, potentially. So max alerts is basically how many alerts are going to get sent before the alert notifications stop. The alert is still active potentially, but you're not going to receive any more alerts coming through. So obviously in this case, the default is 1. We're going to send 1 alert as soon as we timers all get hit, and then we won't send any further alerts out unless the alert clears or we acknowledge the alert. If you do -1, that means just infinite. It'll just keep sending alerts as long as it's active. Delay, this is a timer, same with interval, and you've got these shorthand M for standing for minutes, you've got hour, H for hours, etc. Or it's in seconds anyway, so you can actually just convert this straight to 60 seconds. Now what the delay is, it's how soon after the alert is triggered do we then send an actual notification out to the users. So if we detect that this device is down and we set the delay to 1 minute, then we're only going to trigger an actual notification 1 minute after the alert has been detected. You can change that to any value you want. It can be quite useful to suppress sort of noisy alerts that might happen. So you might have a device that actually does frequently go down because of an issue, and rather than just completely disable alerts for that device, you could set this so that it only triggers after 15 minutes as an example. And that way, if the device comes back online in the time that the notifications are due to be sent, then nothing will get sent out. The interval is just how frequently we resend those notifications. So if you've got max alert set more than 1, then we basically will send out multiple alerts based on your max alerts configuration at this particular interval. So in this case here, what's going to happen is 1 minute after the alert is triggered, we're going to send a notification out via the transports, and then we're going to continuously send them every 5 minutes thereafter. So you can change that to 15 minutes, you can change that all the way down to 1 minute. Okay, moving on to the next options, we've got mute alerts. So this basically is where it just automatically will mute that alert when it gets created. So you might want to do this for informational purposes. You have the historical information around what's happening with the alert, but you actually don't want to trigger any transports off the back of it. You can invert the rule match. So it's probably a less used option in LibreNMS because you'd probably just build out what you wanted to do in the builder itself, but you could invert that match. So if we're checking that the device is down here, we invert it. We're actually saying that we want to check every device that's up now. These two options are basically turning on the ability to send these types of alerts out to yourselves. So you've got recovery alerts and acknowledgement alerts. And what will happen is if the device becomes healthy again, we would normally send out a recovery alert to say, right, okay, this device is now back online. Now you can suppress those from going out just by disabling this. And the same with the acknowledgement. When somebody comes into the interface or via the API and actually acknowledges an alert has been triggered, you can suppress those notifications going out as well. Match devices. So this is where, rather than doing it in the UI builder that you saw above, where we might actually bind an alert to a particular host, you would actually do it in here. So you can do individual devices. So if you can scroll to the bottom, we can see all the devices that are set up in this demo account. You can do it to groups. So we've got a testing IP group here. Or you can actually bind it to locations as well. So if you want to do an alert rule to check all devices are down in a particular part of the world, then you can pin that to the locations, and any devices attached to that location will automatically be included. I'm going to leave this blank. So by default, if it's blank, it's going to match all of the devices coming through. Now, again, just like the invert rule match, you can invert the selection here. So actually, if you want to do all but 5 of your devices, then you could select those 5 rather than say 95, and then you can just turn this option on and actually flip that matching around. Transports here. So this is the ability where you can go off and bind transports to this alert rule. Now at the minute we haven't actually got any created in the system, and that's okay if you don't have any transport groups here and you don't select them. Then basically what will happen is any default rule that you create will automatically be used for all alert rules without an active transport or transport group associated with them. Procedure URL. So this is just a statically defined URL that you can put in here. Might be a link across to your, say, Confluence documentation or your wiki pages, etc., which with procedures of how to triage these alerts that are coming through. So you can put that into there. And then certain notes. So this might be sort of overriding notes to your procedures that you might want to happen. It might be something to say, contact X engineer if it's past these certain hours. But you put these notes in and they can be available in the alerts themselves. So I'm going to save this one now. And we can see the page is refreshed. We've got our testing device down that we've just created. It's impacting all devices or has the ability to. We've got no transports allocated to it. These are the notification options, and this is the rule that we've set up. Now, you can easily turn this on and off here. So it's worth noting that when you create an alert rule, it will be enabled by default. So if you're not sure the impact the rule might have, you might want to just come in and disable it straight away, and you can do some testing off the back of this. You've obviously got the ability to edit these rules, and it's the same form as you saw when we created one. And naturally, you can also delete them from here. Okay, so I'm going to show you the advanced side of things now. This isn't necessarily where you would create a rule from the advanced screen. Obviously, you might use the SQL query that gets generated to create a new rule off the back of this, as I showed you the ability to import from SQL. But if I go now in and edit this alert rule itself, we skip across to the advanced tab. So we can see here what's actually happening in the background with LibreNMS is we're generating a MySQL query off the back of the rule that you created. Now, you can take this query, I'm just going to quickly show you this, drop that into the MySQL client and run that. Now, it's worthwhile noting, obviously we have these placeholders. So this is why I was saying earlier on that all tables have to have a device ID, or at least be able to get back to a device ID, because the rules themselves are always associated with individual devices. So here, if I want to test it against an individual device, I just need to give it the device ID. Alternatively, I just want to see what the impact might be across all devices, which is the default in essence. Then I just run this query now. And we can see here we've got one result returned that it was saying we've got, actually two results returned here. So we're saying we've got two devices down. So this rule would match those two devices and send an alert out. Okay, so if you want to do something a little bit more advanced with this, you can use this query as your baseline. Select override. So that means now any changes you make in the UI builder itself are no longer going to get reflected in this query. So it's worthwhile noting that you can't go back and now add in additional fields to check in the builder itself. You have to do it in this query here. And what we can do is just go, right, okay, carry on writing your SQL query. So here we could do and devices.hostname equals iOS XR. So as we did before in the builder, where we looked for a hostname specifically with iOS XR in it, we're doing the same in this custom query now. That in itself probably isn't that useful. Just close this down, but I'll show you in the builder here. So we've got some example of an advanced query of where you might use this. So processors, if you were to build an alert rule to say, I want to see processors above 50% utilization, LibreNMS actually will look at every single individual processor or core within the platform that you're monitoring. And it will check each one of those against your rule that you've created. Now, you might not be interested if you've got 10 cores in a system. You might not be interested if one of them goes over 50%. What actually you're looking for is the average. Now, you can't do that, unfortunately, in the interface. What you can do is a query like this, where you can kind of see now we're averaging the sort of processor usage across all of the different cores, and we're checking if it's over 10. So if you wanted to state this, you just copy this out, go back to your builder, go to the advanced tab and paste that into there. And you can see we should have the placeholder still in here. So we've got this where device ID equals ? So that should run. You can change this to say, well, actually, I want to see if it's 40% CPU usage. So there'll be a variety of things you might be able to do with this advanced. What I'm going to do is go back to notifications though, because it's worthwhile just showing you on here some other areas of this. You've got this plus symbol. Now it provides some information around what the reason might be around why the alert rule is triggered for this device. So because this is testing that the device is down, we're not looking at sort of processor usage or port usage. So all it's saying here now is that this is the last time we tried to ping the device, and that's how long that process actually took. And obviously we know that this is down because of ICMP problems. And then this one here, same thing. So we've got this output that shows you the last ping time that's happened for this device. Now, as a knock engineer or a support engineer, you might want to come in and acknowledge it. You might have picked this alert up. You might be triaging it, dealing with it at the time. So you can come in here and acknowledge the alert. You type in your general message. And you have the ability to acknowledge this until the alert clears. So what happens in LibreNMS is, let's say you're creating an alert that tracks for ports that go down. Now, you might have 48 ports in a device. One port might go down at the start and triggers an alert. You then come along and acknowledge that alert, and nothing's going to get, no more trigger, like alert notifications are going to get sent out. And that's absolutely fine. If then a second port goes down, we would then send another notification to say, actually, this alert has just got worse, and we, in essence, unacknowledge the problem, and it gets notified out to users again. If you turn this option on, then that doesn't happen. No matter what happens with the state getting worse or better, you won't actually receive any more alerts going forward. So we're going to leave that switched off. We can acknowledge this alert now. You can see here things like this change view, so to show it's no longer red. It's at least been acknowledged. We have a note in here now, which is basically the information I've just provided to it. And you can update that note as well. So I can come in here and delete that, or just add more to it. Details just gives you a little bit of a data dump about this device and any associated table information. So just because this is purely a device being checked is down, we've just got device information here. But you can see the ID, the sysname values, you've got the host name up here, etc. All relevant if you need to do a little bit of debugging. So we've created some of the alert rules. You would have seen in there we've got some default options that are selected. So as I go to create a new alert rule, things like the maximum alerts, the delays, etc. are all defaulted to certain values. Now if you come into the global settings page for your install, go over to alerting. Here we have the ability to change some of these default options. So if I go into the first one here, alert rule default settings, here you can see some of the same values that we've set up a second ago. So I can change these defaults and it will get interpreted into the UI builder when you create new alerts going forward. So it's worthwhile setting these so you're not repeating yourself every single time. Also worthwhile to show just these other sections. So as you're building out, say, transports using email, then you'd come in here and actually configure some of the mail options. And then there are some general alert settings here. You'll find most of these are deprecated now. So there's only a couple of small alert sort of options that you can turn on and off near the bottom. They should be fairly self-explanatory overall. Okay, so if I just head back to the alert rules now, and we can see in the time that we've been going through some of the other areas of the system, we've now switched away from a green tick, which means that everything is healthy and okay for that particular rule, to this warning triangle. And this is basically indicating that there's some devices impacted by this alert rule. If it was impacting all devices, you'd see a red cross and everything in red instead. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to device dependency. So it's worth noting that LibreNMS has the ability to do device dependency where you're going to set a parent device for child devices. It's honoured in the alerting system. So when you create an alert rule to say, like, check all devices are down, what will happen actually is we'll do a device dependency lookup and say, is there any parent devices for this one that's down? If that device, that's the parent device, is down, then we won't actually send any alerts out for the child devices, only the parent device. If the parent device is up, then we'll send alerts out for the child device. So you can see this in, if you head to devices, and then device dependencies. So here we can see our list of devices on the left-hand side, and if there's any parents associated with it. So this is the only one we've got associated at the moment, just as a bit of a test. It's quite easy, just click on edit. And then in here now you can select all of the other devices that might be parent for this device. Just save that again. Okay, I'll show you scheduled maintenance now as well. So if you head over to alerts and scheduled maintenance. We've got nothing set up right now, but if you hit schedule maintenance top left, we've got a fairly simple form to complete with some relevant information. So usual title or name at the top. And then notes that you might want to put in there. It's not mandatory, but you can just add some additional notes and say why the maintenance is happening. You have the option to turn recurring off. So if you know that every Wednesday at say 7 PM at night, you do some work on the network and devices may go up and down, you can just set this recurring so that gets put in place every time that the work is due to start. You don't have to remember to go off and do it. If not, then you need to specify an actual start and end time manually. So I'm going to leave this starting at that particular. So basically now we're going to last 24 hours. And then here you can map this to individual devices, groups, as I showed you before when you created alert rule, or the locations. So if I know that this rack is going to be going off at a certain time, then I can go in here now and schedule this maintenance. Usual options to be able to edit and delete. But then we also have this little indicator here to say whether it's current or in maintenance mode or it's expired. So this will change as time moves on and we hit 12:38 here, then we will then go into maintenance mode, and eventually when it passes tomorrow in 24 hours, we'll disable maintenance mode automatically. Okay, so we've created an alert rule. We've tested the SQL query. What we actually might want to do now is test the alert rule is either triggered or not triggered by a device, but next time it's polled. So if we head over to our devices, and obviously we know that we've got a down device already here, so this is the one I'm going to test this on. And what you want to do is go to settings. On the right hand side again, we've got a capture option, and in here you can actually run sort of discovery, polling, and SNMP debug ability. We want to select alerts at the end here, and then if we click run, what it's doing now is it runs through each of the rules that we've got, and it tells us the rule itself, what we've created, the builder. It shows you the query, so you can copy and paste from here as well, not just the advanced tab of what query is going to get run as part of that rule. And then it tells us if we've matched or not matched for this specific device. So in this case, we've got two devices down due to ICMP. Now, this device is down, but I know it's down because of SNMP, not ICMP. So we're not matching there. And then this one, which is our latest one we've just added in, again, same premise here, which is the rule we've created, the actual query that gets generated from the builder. And then we can see this one does match. So we know at this particular stage that this rule is going to trigger for this particular device. If we head over to notifications, so we can see here. So we've got two down. We've got both of these devices marked as down at the moment. And that's where you're going to see this kind of information. If you want to see historical information, you can go to alert history. And you can see we've got a list of all the devices here and whether they've triggered against each of these rules. So these ones at the top, highlighted in green, they're okay. These ones in red, they're obviously triggering one of the rules itself, and it's the rule that was listed here. Now you have statistics as well. It's probably not that useful. There's not a huge amount of data in that we can see in here at the minute, but it just goes back over a certain period of time and records what devices, what alerts are actually going out for this particular device. Okay, just last part of this video now, I'm just going to show you how to test on the command line. So if I head back to my shell, just exit out of this database here. Okay, now we have two scripts to do some testing in LibreNMS. One is for templates, so -template.php, and the other one is -alert.php. If I run this without any parameters, we need to pass on a few things here, which I've showed in a previous video, but -r is the rule ID. So if I head back to my interface now, go back to alert rules and hover over this icon on the left hand side, we can see this is showing up as number 23. So -r23, we need to pass on the host name, head over to devices, and And then we can see on the left-hand side here, the ID for this particular device is 38. So I'm going to pass that on because we know that's down and should trigger. And then -D for debug information. See a bunch of SQL queries that get put out here. These are all being run in the background to gather data on things like the alerts that have been triggered, the information about the rule, the device, etc. We get information about the template before we go on and say, right, we are actually going to issue an alert out for this particular rule associated with this particular device. Here we're pulling out the rule ID from the alerts, so we can then say, right, okay, what transports are associated? And this is where we start pulling out the transports in these two lines here. Now, because I've got no configured transports, we're getting that response back. If I had a transport available, it would show sort of more debug information. And if you see the first video in this series, that'll go into a little bit more detail about what you've seen and why you've seen it there. As always, folks, thanks for watching. If you've got any other suggestions for content you might want to see, then please do drop me a message and we'll look at putting something together.